We all have reasons for why we start our weight loss journey. Mine was fear, because I had some hip pain that was really blocking my ability to walk normally. And I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to do my sports. But I was also afraid, with the way that my hip was feeling, that at some point I wouldn't even be able to walk properly, to be able to leave my house, to be able to do normal things like go shopping. That was really scary. Fear causes us to be willing to do things that we normally wouldn't do. And I want to share today the 4 things that, because of my fear, I ended up doing that allowed me to lose 80 pounds and to maintain a healthy weight for more than 5 years. But before I can go into that, I want to just talk a little bit about why I was so afraid. Because I had had experiences with doctors that left me really not trusting medical. I had, on more than one occasion, had doctors tell me that medical problems that I had were never going to go away and I would have to learn to live with them. Later on to find out that that wasn't true. But also, I had seen many people, because of the work that I do, over-medicated and struggling, only to find out when they diminished their medication, it was the medication causing their problems. My desperation to not end up on medication is what resulted in me doing a lot of research to try to figure out, was there any way that I could, first of all, understand my hip issue and then solve it that wouldn't result in me taking something. So what I did was I went to Dr. Google, which is not something that I would encourage anybody to do. But again, when you're desperate, you do things that you know aren't the smartest. So I went to Dr. Google, and of course my biases about what I understood at the time about health played a role in what I searched, which played a role in the information I got back. So I ended up being confirmed that my weight had to be the answer. And there was all kinds of talk about what I should do to try to lose weight. And of course, I followed Dr. Google's advice. For 3 months, I ate a very, what I considered healthy, low-fat way of eating. So vegetables, rice, and I really had the minimum amount of meat, and there was always low-fat meat. I did a good job. I had a lot of salads and low-fat dressings, and I added to that because I thought I have to exercise. So I went for very, very, very long walks because I couldn't do much else besides walking. Those walks, excruciatingly painful, because remember, I'm doing all of this because my hip is killing me, but I do it anyways because I needed to solve this problem. And what ended up happening was I didn't lose not even a pound, but the walking seemed to help. Somehow going for long walks meant that for a good number of hours after the walk, my hip felt better. So that made me return to Dr. Google, and eventually I figure out that I had some kind of inflammation problem. I really wish I could remember what website I was on when I found that data that said, like, oh, if you're exercising a joint and it feels better, that's an inflammation problem. I cannot for life of me find it again, but this led me to more Googling that showed me that there was a long list of medications that could help with my inflammation problem, which again, I wasn't really enthusiastic about doing, and that there was the possible hip surgery that my own doctors had been talking to me about. Again, was not enthusiastic about doing that either. But this one small detail that was in all this mess said something about carbohydrates, so sugar, having an impact on inflammation, basically causing inflammation. And that non-medical answer stood out to me because I was looking for a non-medical, don't need to take medication answer. My Googling was suggesting that it was the sugar that I was eating that was causing my inflammation, but not from a you're too fat point of view, but more so from a, if you eat a lot of sugar, inside of your body, sugar causes damage, like damage to tissue, which I hadn't remembered hearing that before. And I can tell you that because I hadn't heard it before, I really had a hard time believing it. So that piece of information that I learned somewhere in February, early February, I Googled and Googled and Googled and researched and found documentation. So I found actual research that stated that carbohydrates cause inflammation. And in all of that research and driving myself crazy, I eventually fell on some doctors on YouTube talking about the fact that carbohydrates cause inflammation. Can I tell you that I was shocked that this was a topic that was being talked about and apparently talked about for years before I even found it, and I was completely unaware. Now, I actually found out that carbohydrates weren't the only thing causing inflammation. Also, seed oils were talked about as causing inflammation, but we're going to come back to that point in a little bit. When I learned that the level of sugar intake that I would need to kind of come down to be able to solve my problem was really low, like much lower than what I was eating, 20 grams, like it was ridiculously low in my opinion, I was really concerned. I wasn't sure how on earth that was even possible to do. Like, how does somebody eat that small amount of carbohydrates and still end up having, like, being able to eat a meal? And so all the research that I did pointed me towards one diet only, which was the keto diet. But because my hip was in so much excruciating pain, because of the fact that I got into the place where, yes, if I walk for an hour every day, I could get 2 to 3 hours of relief. But in my job, I need to work for more than 2 to 3 hours. So therefore, I would never actually be able to get through a full day without being in pain. I was willing to look at this diet. I was willing to give this a shot because I needed a solution that was going to work for me for a full day. So I actually committed to doing a keto diet. Committing to keto was not easy. First of all, I thought it was crazy and possibly even not true that carbs were causing my problem. So in my mind, there was a part of me thinking, what if I do all of this and it doesn't solve anything? So that idea was there. The second problem was I had a spouse who, when I finally told him this is what I'm going to do to try to solve the problem, he was like, no, you're not. And he tried to talk me out of it. Then I had the next problem of, okay, now that I've convinced myself and him that I'm doing this, I needed to figure out what vegetables I would actually be able to eat in order to get my carbohydrate intake down to 20 grams. Because first of all, I wasn't a person who actually ate vegetables like regularly. Like that wasn't a thing for me, except for maybe, fun things like French fries. And second of all, if I were to eat French fries as my vegetable, it was going to put me over the 20 grams of carbs that I was allowed to eat. So problematic. Oh, by the way, I also had to convince myself that eating the fat that was on my meat wasn't about to throw me into some kind of heart attack, right? Because truthfully, it's not that I was afraid of fat, but I was always cutting it off, like cutting the extra fat off. And all of a sudden in this diet, I'm being told, eat protein and its accompanying fat. Scary. But I did all these things. All of them. And I got myself started along the path on this diet only to end up living withdrawal. And at first it was hard for me to even realize that that's what was happening. But then at some point I'm like, again, being in the field that I'm in, I'm like, wait a minute. These symptoms, I've seen these symptoms before. And sure enough, when I went and looked up the withdrawal symptoms, I was having classic withdrawal. First of all, fixated on food. Second of all, headache, chills, feeling starving, even though I had just eaten. My mood was all like, I had classic withdrawal symptoms and chasing symptoms. I won't swear, I could tell you that the last thing I expected to come out of trying to solve my hip problem was to learn that I was actually addicted to sugar. And here's where I was. And in all of this, I think that was the most sad I've been in the entire process of my weight loss and my return to good health. That realization made me sad, made me angry. I was frustrated. I was confused. So many feelings. I really couldn't give up because my fear of medication, even worse, my fear of like not being able to walk, was so strong that there was no other solution for me but to keep moving forward. I ate the keto diet to the best of my abilities moving forward every single day. I'm going to admit though, I made some mistakes. When I started, I can admit to you that I wasn't tracking what I was doing. And anybody who's ever tried to do keto knows that if you don't track, like weigh your food and like measure your food and do some kind of calculation, you're not going to know how much carbohydrate there is in broccoli or spinach or kale, or you're not going to know. So I wasn't tracking. I was just cooking the right foods, but then eating how much I wanted. And yeah, so you can imagine that I was going over. And some of those right foods were not necessarily the right foods because they were higher in carb than I even imagined. I made mistakes. And even though I was aware that some foods I shouldn't be eating, for example, potatoes, the other mistake that I made is because I went out to eat at a restaurant and there was so little veg on the plate, I thought that little piece of potato shouldn't be a problem. But boy, was it a problem. And it was a problem for a reason other than the carb count, which I explain in the video that I'm going to link at the end of the video, but also in the description below. So even when I did the research and I knew I shouldn't eat something, eating it, obviously not the best idea. The other mistake that I made was not paying enough attention to the inflammatory oils. Even though I had seen some doctors in the videos that I had watched talk about the fact that seed oils are extremely, a matter of fact, worse than the carbohydrates, I didn't pay enough attention to that. I was still allowing myself to eat foods that had been fried in inflammatory oils. And so it had a huge impact on like my hip inflammation and whether I was feeling good or not. So I want to point out that my hip pain was completely resolved within 98 days, which is amazing. You'll notice I haven't spoken yet about how long it's taken me to lose the 80 pounds. That's because even though it took me just a little bit more than 3 months to solve my hip problem, sometimes the pain would come back because of these mistakes that I was making, right? I'd go over my carb count, my hip is killing me. I eat some nuts that were fried in oil, my hip is killing me. So these mistakes that I was making meant that I was so focused on trying to keep myself feeling good, I actually wasn't paying much attention to my weight, although my weight was going down. What's interesting to me, though, is that the mistakes that I was making, they didn't cause me to get off track. Actually, they solidified me staying on track, because before eating this way, I had lived from the age of 23 till the age of 46 in pain when it came to my joints, my knees, my elbows, my neck, my back, all in pain. When my hip issue happened and I started to eat this way and my hip improved, so did every joint in my body. So for the first time in 23 years, I wasn't walking around in any kind of joint pain. You can't imagine, Wellness Warrior, how that focused me on this diet is doing something amazing and I want to stick to it. Every mistake helped me to see how eating off plan was a huge mistake. My lifelong goal is to be able to have fun. So to do my sports, to play with my kids, to play with the grandkids eventually. Like my lifelong goal involves me being mobile and active. And so when I was able to see that eating a keto diet was allowing me to get my mobility back, I locked it in. That was a pretty easy decision to make given how I was feeling, obviously. So that fear of the returning pain meant that I kept going with eating keto even after the pain was gone, because it would come back every time I stopped. However, that meant that my weight was coming off. And at some point, because I was weighing myself once in a while, I realized that not only did I get to my goal weight, I had actually lost 80 pounds, which wasn't the goal. So I decided to put 10 pounds back on because I didn't like the way that I looked. So Wellness Warrior, can I point out that losing the weight wasn't even a struggle? And keeping it off has not been a struggle. It's 5+ years that I'm sitting here at my current weight. Eating healthy is the best decision. So eating keto is the best decision I've ever made. And if you would like to do it too, I'm going to suggest that you start with getting your cravings under control. There's a video on the screen right here that's going to help you with that. But now I would love to hear from you, Wellness Warrior. What motivates you to do keto? Put that in the comments below. I can't wait to talk to you in the next video.